Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. This is a tutorial on the enum type in Java. And before I talk about enum, I just want to show you what enum is intended to replace. Often in programming in general, you'll have some kind of variable which can only take on certain specific values that represent certain things. So let's take an example of that. I'll type int animal. Now let's say this int animal can take on different values that represent different animals. What I could do is, in my class here, I could declare certain particular integer values that this variable could then take. So I could say public static final int dog equals naught, let's say, and public static final int cat equals 1, and so on. Let's have one more. Public static final int mouse equals 2, and you get the idea. And then later on, I'm not sure why I've got caps lock on. There we go. Yeah, and then later on, I can set this integer value to one of these. So I could say int animal equals cat, and I can do stuff with that like switch animal. Let's put the opening bracket there. Case, well, actually, the quickest way to fill in this switch would be to, I don't know why it's not coming up. Normally, let's check that I've got a build automatically switched on. Normally, you get a little warning by a switch statement, and that enables you to fill in the case values automatically, but I guess it's not working because in fact I'm using an integer and not an enum as I should be doing. But you can type here stuff like case dog, do something, sysout dog, and break, and so on. Now there's a couple of problems with this, at least a couple of problems, and one problem is that int, this animal, I only want it to represent certain of a fixed set of values. I've got only certain animals that it can represent in this scheme. I've only defined 3 different possible animals there, but it could be assigned any value. I could assign it any value at all, like 100 or something, and it wouldn't be clear what that would mean in this case. Really, I'd like to restrict animal here to just these particular values. And if you think an animal is kind of an unrealistic example, this is often used, for example, to represent different kinds of borders with swing components, or different colours is a good example, and so on. So it's very, very common to have a variable that you want to represent different members of a fixed set of values. Let's just run this and check that it does in fact work. We've got cat. Another problem with it is you can't tell just by looking at this what you're meant to set it equal to. You have to know that this exists as well. So if I was passing, let's say I had methods that took this int animal as an argument, I might not know that these constants exist, and I'm going to be in the dark as to what to do about that. Really what we want is a special type that can be set to only represent certain members of a fixed set, and that's what enum does. Enum stands for enumerated, and if you enumerate something, you kind of count through it like 1, 2, 3, and the enum type represents some fixed set that has only particular certain fixed values, although not in actually any particular order. So let's take a look. I'm gonna enum is like the syntax for creating enums in Java is like the syntax for creating classes or interfaces. They're all similar. So I don't know if Eclipse here will give me an option for creating, I can go to new enum, and let's give this a name. I'll call it animal, and click finish. I think that's all good. And then if we look at it here, instead of having public class such and such, we've got public enum such and such, or we could have here interface instead. Only the keyword changes, and apart from that, this is like declaring a class, and it's a lowercase keyword because all the key words in Java are lowercase. And now what we can do with this is I can type cat, dog, mouse like that, just separated by commas. And now if I go back to my main application here, I don't need these constants anymore. And instead of having int animal, I can say animal. So I've created this animal type, just like a class really, and I can declare variables of that type. And to set the value of it, I say animal, for example, dot cat, like that. And I can switch on it just as before. And now let's get rid of these for a minute. Yeah, I'll just delete that. And now in fact, I'm here in Eclipse, and I can get Eclipse, and I'm sure it's the same in other integrated development environments in Java. I can get Eclipse to fill in the possible switch case values for me. If I click the warning here and go to add missing case statements, there we go. I've got case cat, dog, mouse, and default, which should never occur. And let's put sys out here, sys out cat, and sys out dog, like that. And let's run that. And we've got cat here. And of course, if I set it to dog, we'll get dog. And well, mouse wouldn't do anything because I've not put a sys out there. Let's run that. So all that works just because of this. And this is probably like 90% or 95% of what you do with Enum. It's that simple, and that's usually all there is to it. Notice, by the way, that normally if I refer to the enumerated type, I've got to say animal dot cat or dog or mouse. But if you use it with a switch statement, you just use cat, dog or mouse by itself, and Java infers, because you're switching on this particular variable of this type, Java infers that it means animal.dog or animal.cat. I'm not even sure if it will even let you type animal.cat here. I think that will give me an error. So you have to be aware of that. I think that's quite confusing actually, but you need to miss off this bit only if you're using it with a switch. And now having covered the most common case, let's look at some slightly more advanced uses of Enum and other things you can do with it. In fact, the thing with public static final in variables is very, very common in Java. You'll see it in programs everywhere, in the Java API, absolutely everywhere. And Enum is not used nearly as much as it should be. So you won't see it perhaps as often as you expect, but you really should use it in your own code because you've got the type safety there. You can check that this can now only be assigned from this fixed set of animals. You can't give it random numbers and stuff like that. So it's really much better. It's just kind of underused in Java, unfortunately. And the public final static thing, we use final because that makes it a constant in Java, and static because that makes it belong to the class, which saves memory rather than having instances of those constants for each object. But Enum, as I say, is better. So if you look at this Enum thing here, you might wonder what cat, dog and mouse actually are. Are they something, how does this work? And in fact the way it works is cat, dog and mouse are actually objects, at least as far as I understand, of the type animal, strangely enough. So you can see that, for example, by if I do you see, if you do sys out on a num type and enum type, it doesn't really help you. If I do sys out on animal.dog and run it, it will just output like that as a string dog, which is certainly useful. So it doesn't tell me anything about the class, but let's do sys out animal.dog.getClass and see what we get. And if I run that, we can see that the class of these constants is animal. So these are actually objects of the type animal. And although you can't see it here, normally classes in Java implicitly inherit from the object class, object with a capital O, but for Enum, they inherit the immediate ancestor at least, is Java lang enum, and all the classes in the java.lang package, you don't need to import them with an import statement. They're automatically available in your program. So I could do sysout animal dot.dog, let's say, instance of animal. The instance of operator tells us whether it's an instance of a particular class or not. In other words, is the object created from a particular class? And this should say true, and it does. But I can also say instance of enum or java.lang enum, and if I run that, we also get true because child classes are instances of their parent classes. I should say the objects of child classes are instances of the parent classes. Like if you have a car, a particular car is an instance of cars in general. It's also an instance of a machine. A car is a kind of machine, which could be represented by a parent class. So that's kind of how enum works. And let's take a look at a few interesting things that you can do with enum. One thing is you can give the enum type a constructor. And you can give it methods as well, actually. But you have to remember to finish this list here with a semicolon. So let's type here public animal, like that. And you see we get an error here. Let's save that. And in fact, I need to finish this with a semicolon, like that. And also, I think you can't actually declare the constructor public, come to think of it. It can only be private, or you can just miss it off, and it'll have package level kind of validity. Now, why would you want to do that, given that you can't even make the constructor public, and you can't do new on your enum type? Well, the answer is I could supply parameters here. So let's say, for example, string name. I could supply whatever parameters I want, and now each of these objects must be instantiated with a name, because I've only got one constructor here and it expects a name. And to do that, I just supply it in round brackets here. So you don't use new with enum, but these are objects and you can supply values right here. Let's say for a cat, Fergus the cat, and for a dog, Fido, and the mouse, Jerry. So whatever parameters you declare here, you can then supply here. And that's no use unless you do something with them. So you can also give your enum type like instance data here. Let's say private string name. And then just as you would normally do in a class, I can say this.name equals name. So now my animals have got a name. And of course, there's not much point doing that unless I do something with it. Let's give it a, actually, let's right click here and go to source, generate getters and setters. And let's create a getter for name. So public string get name returns name. And now I can do stuff like, let's do sysout animal dot mouse dot get name and run that, and hey presto, I'm getting the name of my animal. You can also override toString here. So I can, I'm not sure if this will work. If I right click and go to source, generate toString, I think it might not work for enum. This operation is not applicable to enums, but in fact it is applicable. And I can do public string toString. You have to remember the right syntax to override toString. And I can do return name, like that, or return whatever string that I like. Let's say this animal is called plus name. Let's do that. And now, if I do sysout on my animal, like I'm doing sysout on this dog, and I run this, it's going to say this animal is called Fido. So exactly as with normal objects, you can override toString with with enums. There are some special methods that are inherited from Java lang enum as well. So now, yeah, if I do sysout on this enum, I'm going to get the two-string version. But often, for programmatic purposes, you want this as a string. You want the actual enum value as a string. And the question is, if you've overridden toString, how can you get at it? And enum supplies you with a special method that gets you the enumerated constant as a string. And to do that, I can say, let's have sysout again here, and let's just say the enum constant, or let's say enum name as a string. And I use a method, let's say animal.dog again, .name. So I implemented getName myself, but this has nothing to do with that. This is a special predefined method inherited from Java lang enum called name. And if I run that, so this animal is called Fido, but the actual, as a string, the actual name of the enum is dog in uppercase, and that gets me this value here, and that's very useful. For example, if you want to save an enum constant to a database, you probably will want to do it by getting the this as a string and saving that string to your database. And you probably want to define an enum set of possible strings in your database for efficiency, but that's getting away from the subject. And you can also do the reverse with the value of method. So I could do stuff like, let's say animal, let's call it animal2 equals animal, that's the class, and I'm going to use a static method called value of. And if I supply that with, for example, cat as a string, then I can do sysout animal2, and if I run this, then you see here this animal is called Fergus. Why is it called Fergus? Because my cats are called Fergus here, and here when I do value of and I supply a string corresponding to one of my enum constants, then I get the appropriate enum as an object. It's really important to realize that that these are not strings, these are special objects. We think of them as enum constants, but I can turn them into a string using name, using the name method. Where did I use it? It's here. And I can get a string and turn it into an enum constant using value of. And I can also override toString to create a user-friendly version of the enum for display purposes or for debugging or whatever. I think that's pretty much it for enums, and you won't often need to use this stuff. I could define whatever other methods I wanted here and give them more instance data, but as I say, like 95% of the time you just stick to the simple usage that we saw earlier, where you just define a bunch of constants and use them, and even that is not used as much as it should be in Java. So that's it for this tutorial. There's going to be more videos in this course on serialization and other stuff, and you can always find those by going to www.caveofprogramming.com, and I always put my latest videos on there. So until next time, oh yeah, and actually I'll put this source code on there as well. You just need to go to the homepage, scroll down to the YouTube videos and find the right tutorial in that section, and you'll find the source code for this in the page right there. So until next time, happy coding.